afternoon, and I'm going to fix dinner for Frida and me tonight. And got to think of what I wanted to make, and I decided I found in the pantry this can of baked or butter beans, Lima beans. Get this right in a minute. It's the most hated food in the Army. No matter what you did, everybody hated it. It dates clear back to the Civil War. And some soldier wrote home and he says, the only thing we hate worse than losing a battle to the rebels is Lima beans with ham. And it was also used in C rations and MREs, and it's just hung on and on and on, lima beans and ham. And but I'm going to make it. I happen to like lima beans. Frida likes some lima beans, so we can't lose on this. So I'm going to make a video on this, and then there will be a story that fits in with my Army days after the cooking part of this. Okay, the water's boiling there, so I'll throw the broccoli in to cook. And while that's happening, I'll put the beans in the bowl. The beans have been in the microwave heating. So I'll divide those up. That looks about like the even amount. And here's the ham already warmed. Frida's already at the table waiting for her dinner, which won't be but about another minute or so. Turn the toaster on over here to toast the bread. Okay, the broccoli has been in there long enough that it's blanched. Ow! Oh, that is hot. The bread is toasted, so it goes on. And this is ready to go to the table. There it is on the table. Take a taste of this and see how it is. Just like I remembered from the Army, and I liked it there. What do you think of it, hon?
Good. You got me by a mouthful, but it's really good. Couldn't wait.
Not a bad dinner out of a can. And especially one that all the soldiers hated.
Why? I don't know. It's so good.
Try this broccoli. Yeah, it's steamed just about right. Well, just exactly the time I'd planned dinner to be, so I'm going to go ahead and finish dinner, and then I have a story for you. Okay, and now for my story. And you may wonder why I put this cap on. It's because it's the cap that I wore in the Army, and it's a key part of this story. I graduated from high school in 1947, and I was salutatorian. And as such, I managed to pick up a one-year scholarship to Texas A&M. So I went immediately there, and that first year was pretty nice with all everything paid for, books and everything like that, dormitory. And that first year was pretty nice, but then the second year was a little bit more difficult. I was trying to work and putting in a lot of hours at night that would have probably been better off for studying. Fortunately, I had some rich relatives there in the Panhandle that helped out some, but they were putting a half dozen kids of their own through colleges for learning or become lawyers and doctors and all of that, so they didn't have any surplus money either, but they helped out where they could. And I looked around, and all the rest of the students there in the engineering classes were there on the GI Bill from World War II. They were all getting everything free and then a check every month in addition. And I was scratching and scraping for everything that I could find. And along toward the end of that year, the ones that had graduated were beginning to find out that jobs just weren't that plentiful for engineers. And it got to be a standing joke. What do you say to an engineer? Fill her up with regular, check the oil, and check the tires. And that was about the jobs that they were getting. So at the end of that second year, I decided that I better start looking at something else. So I got a job as a pilot of a crop spraying airplane, and started out at the front of the wheat harvest, spraying weeds in the wheat to kill them before they harvested it. And I stayed ahead of the harvest all the way into Canada. And I came home with a pretty good pocket full of money, and I wanted a car, so I went over to the Dodge dealership, and sitting there on the floor was a Dodge Wayfarer Sports Roadster. Oh, my heart melted when I saw that. Of course, they'd had it for about 3 or 4 months, and everybody would look at it and they ain't going to buy a car with only one seat. So, a little negotiation, and I sat down there and wrote them a check for my first car. And you know what? I started a program of that, and I never financed a car again the rest of my life. Every time I got a new car, I wrote a check for it. And I just wondered how much money I saved in all these years from when I was 19 or 20 years old until now, at 92. And I'm sure it was much of it. But at any rate, I was driving my car around, and it would pick up girls, and in the process I managed to pick up the prettiest girl in the senior class. Her name was Janet. And she was the head cheerleader and the football queen and the class queen and the class president, and Uh, she just had everything. And I fell in lust with her, and she fell in lust with my car. Her mother was also on my side and kept saying, "Oh, what a beautiful couple they make." And her dad was a little bit different. He owned the drugstore and was a pharmacist. And he says, "That guy doesn't have a real job, and all he does is fly around in that damn airplane, and he's not going to amount to anything." So I didn't have the whole family on my side. But anyway, it was coming along, and as was the case in those days, no matter how hot and heavy the dating got, nothing happened between the shoulders and the knees. And as always, I'm saving myself for marriage. Well, I got my draft notice. Being born on November 3rd, 1928, put me 3 days too late to be drafted for World War II, and it put me at the top of the list. Next thing I knew, there was 3 of us. A guy by the name of Obert Philpott, a guy, Ducky Buck Dent, and he was the dumbest kid in school. In fact, he dropped out about halfway through the 10th grade, and we went over on the bus to get our physicals. And as we started to leave, he was standing there, and I said, "Better get on the bus." And he says, "I'm going back home. I got flat feet." So he didn't go with us. Well, I went through basic training, went to school for soils analysis, and by the time I got through with school, the whole unit had gotten orders to move to California and reopen Camp Beale. And it was pretty obvious what the purpose was to teach the unit all their jobs in preparation to go to Korea. And so as I came through Stinnett, I picked up my car and drove it to California, which was a foolish move because we were only going to be there a couple months. And as time came to closer for us to go, I began to wonder what I was going to do with that car. I didn't really want to sell it, and I didn't know how I was going to get it home. And Janet and I had been riding each other, and she said, well, I've got a break in college. Her dad had sent her to Dallas to college to get her away from me. And we got a 2-week break, and my mother's sister lives in Sacramento, so we'll ride out on the train. I'll come get your car, we'll drive home, and I'll deliver it back to your house. So it worked fine, and on the last weekend we were at Camp Beale, I got a weekend pass. She came up there, and we went to Lake Tahoe. And Lake Tahoe is straddled on the California-Nevada border. And on the one side of the line down the middle of the hotel, there was a wedding chapel, and she begged and begged and begged for us to get married. And I kept telling her, no, I'm not going to get married and leave the next day going overseas, not knowing what's going to happen or anything. So after a certain amount of crying, well, she decided to give me a honeymoon weekend there that I would never forget. And we drove back to Camp Beale, and the last thing I ever saw of her or my car was as she drove out the gate leaving. Well, we loaded aboard the ship in 2 weeks on it, and then getting situated in Korea and everything, our mail finally caught up with us. And the mail clerk's office, or his cell, was in the same building where my office is going to be and everything. And oh, and by the way, they no more than got there, and they got orders that they had to ship all the National Guard troops back home. So we didn't have any rank at all in the unit. And they shipped them all out, so they started filling the slots with us. Even though it might call for a higher rank, we went in there. I was a corporal by that time, and one of the higher ranking people in there. I had the draftsman, surveyors, demolition man, photographer, and the mailman all in that building there where I was, and I was going to be the NCOIC of it. The day that the mail came in and the mail clerk got it all separated, and he pulled out our mail and brought it to us there where we were, rather than having us stand up, wait and stand in line up the mess hall when they had mail to call. And I had a pretty good handful of mail. I had 3 or 4 copies of the weekly newspaper and several letters and some letters she had written me. But I turned one of them, the mail clerk, when he handed it to me, he sat down there for some reason, and I couldn't figure out why he was just sitting there. And I turned this one over, and it was a picture postcard. And the kind that you get free in a motel. Picture of the motel on it. It opens up to where you can write inside of it, and then on the other side you put the address. And I looked at the picture on it, and it had a circle around one of the rooms, and an arrow says, "Our room." I opened it, and the first line was, "Dear Jim," not the usual greeting. I just wanted to let you know that Bucky and I got married, and we went to El Paso on our honeymoon, and I drove your car because his tires were so thin he was afraid he couldn't make it. And I hate to tell you this, but your car was stolen from in front of the hotel. I was going to send your ring back to you, but I had to sell it to pay for a bus ticket to get home. And Art, the mail guy, looked at me and he says, "You okay?" And I says, "Damn, I'm going to miss that car." But anyway, that's my story. Oh, and this picture here, that was at my promotion party to Sergeant First Class, and you notice there's none of this on the cap. This was an Air Force emblem that they issued to SCARWF troops who were assigned to the Air Force. We were Army troops, and that was to show we belonged to the Air Force. And kind of as a token, they let us put the Army engineers collar pin over here to show the engineers that we were in the engineers. And then our rank, we no longer put rank on our sleeves, we put it on here with a little pin. But I was Master Sergeant when I came home, and all those fast promotions earned us the nickname of Shake and Bake Sergeants. When I arrived back home at the end of my 2 years, I flew into Amarillo, and there stood the sheriff from where I lived. He had brought a prisoner over, and I caught a ride home with him, and on the way home he hired me as deputy sheriff. And he mentioned something about when he got out of the Army in World War II, he was a Sergeant First Class, and here I come home a Master Sergeant, which I don't know if it's impressed him or he was just making conversation, but he turned out to be the crookedest son of a bitch that ever lived, and I worked for him 6 months, and I decided that I'd had more than enough of that, and so I went on to other things, and I never went back to college. I opened a motorcycle shop, ran it for several years. I did see Janet one time. She came by the shop, and she had her son, who was about 4 at that time. And my mother had sent me a clipping out of the newspaper, and it said Mr. and Mrs. Buck Dent had a 6-pound baby boy, and the date on it. I looked at it and I went, it wasn't mine. And that was another good thing to come out of that. I guess somebody had it in for me while I was gone, but I only had one picture of the car, and I took it while we were at Lake Tahoe, and here it is. Dodge only made those 2 years. They're now collector's items. They only made 1,500 of them. And I saw one go on Barrett Jackson for $80,000. Too bad I don't still have it. So that's my dinner and my story. And God bless America, God bless Texas, and you folks have a great day. Bye.